It's a Wonderful Life. Is it still wonderful? Let's chat about it on this episode of The Monitors. As I've mentioned before, there are many movies that have become part of our holiday traditions. There is one movie that thankfully has resisted a remake for almost 80 years. It's the timeless It's a Wonderful Life. This classic, directed by Frank Capra, stars the very prolific Jimmy Stewart in his prime as everyman George Bailey. George Bailey learns one of the most valuable lessons about the benefits of a life lived on the lives it touches. And when he's done, we get one of the most wonderful gifts ever given on screen to an audience, when a character receives validation. In the off chance that you don't know the story, spoilers ahead. And for those of you who haven't watched it yet, you know who you are. This is for you. The film opens with Angel Second Class Clarence getting a briefing about a man on Earth who is in crisis. His job will be to save this man and hopefully earn his wings. So as Clarence sees the life of this man up to the present, in the story, we get to watch as well. George Bailey, when just a child, saves the life of his younger brother Harry from drowning, which unfortunately costs him the hearing in one ear. Also at his job at the local pharmacy, George inadvertently saves the life of another child when he realizes that his boss, the druggist Mr. Gower, overcome by grief, mistakenly poisons a prescription. A few years later, when George is set to leave his home of Bedford Falls for college, his father falls ill and passes away, which forces George to forego his much-anticipated college and traveling the world to tend to the family-run building and loan, if only to keep the miserly Mr. Potter, played by Lionel Barrymore, from ruining Bedford Falls with his greed. George sends his brother Harry, Todd Carnes, off to school in his place. But when it's George's turn to go, he changes his mind when newly married Harry has been offered a good job by his new father-in-law. George goes on to marry his sweetheart Mary Hatch, played by the lovely Donna, and they begin raising children in an old, drafty house. George continues to scrape and wheel and deal to provide homes to the residents of Bedford Falls through the building and loan with his forgetful Uncle Billy. George even manages to keep the building and loan open at the onset of the Great Depression. You get it. George is a great guy, loved by those who know him, except Potter, who wants George and the building and loan out of the way so he can monopolize Bedford Falls. But George always does the right thing. Even when he can't fight in the war because of his bad ear, he does his part with metal drives and rubber drives and pretty much anything he can do to contribute. Unfortunately, one day, when making a deposit at the bank, Uncle Billy gets caught up in bragging to Potter over Harry getting the Medal of Honor for saving a transport full of soldiers in his fighter plane, and he mistakenly swaps newspapers with Potter, and his newspaper has the deposit in it. Once Potter realizes it, he knows he has George and the building alone right where he wants them. George freaks out, of course, and after a rather dark conversation with Potter, concludes that his family would be better off financially if he were dead. When he decides to jump off a bridge, the Angel, Second Class, Clarence, jumps in knowing that George's instinct would kick in and that George would save him instead. After a brief conversation with George, who concludes it might have been better had he not been born at all, Clarence gets permission to show George what the world would have been like had he not been born. Instantly, George can hear in his deaf ear and decides to journey back home, but Bedford Falls has become Pottersville, and the housing development Bailey Park is gone. None of George's friends know him. His own mother doesn't know him. His children aren't born. His house is a shack. Mary is a homely spinster and doesn't know him either. His friend Violet, who he once helped, has fallen on hard times and become a prostitute. His favorite bar is run by an underling of the former owner, who has grown to be way less kind, and where George also learns that his old boss is an ex-con for poisoning a child because George wasn't there to save him. And Harry is dead because George wasn't there to save him either, and consequently Harry wasn't there to save the transport of soldiers. Seeing all of this, the realization becomes crystal clear, although Clarence restates the obvious. you really lived a wonderful life. When George prays to God to be alive again, his prayer is answered and he races home just in time to meet the bank examiner and a flurry of people rallied by Mary that George has helped or done right by over the years, all come to help in his hour of need. And with the sound of a bell ringing, we know that Clarence has earned his angel wings. It's a Wonderful Life is dated. Hopefully so much that no one will ever try to remake it. The performances are fantastic. Jimmy Stewart is as good as he ever was. His performance isn't dated. It's as powerful today as when they shot this film. Everyone has had the feeling of not being appreciated, of doing the right thing only to get punched in the jaw for it. It's a Wonderful Life speaks to that and reminds us that even when you may not feel appreciated, you are. After years of having watched this movie every Christmas Eve with my wife and kids, when they were young enough to be bothered, the scene when all George's years of sewing are paid off in that final scene, I still get a little choked up. Validation. The best scenes in movies are about validation. That's bigger than beating the monster or the bad guy or the big payday. No matter who you are, everyone wants to hear it. You matter. You matter to me. You matter to us. It's a Wonderful Life gave us, in my opinion, the best scene of You Matter ever. It has yet to be topped. And tell the people who matter to you, they matter. Oh, that's going to do it. So, It's a Wonderful Life. Is it your favorite Christmas movie? If not, what is? Let us know in the comments below. Oh, and please give us a like and click that subscribe button. Please join the family. We'll catch you guys next time. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Peace, and you matter.